Vanessa doing the pictures? She said she did.
I'd like to begin this morning by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is part of the treaty lands and the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. I am grateful to the Indigenous nations on whose traditional territory the town of Halton Hills is located for their care and stewardship of the land that preserved the beautiful natural places that we enjoy today. Thank you for joining us here today to celebrate the renaming of this beautiful neighborhood park in the name of Henry Thomas Shepherd, MBE Park. My name is Warren Harris. I'm Commissioner of Recreation and Parks, and it's my pleasure to serve as Master of Ceremonies this morning. We're going to start the day off with some words from Mayor Rick Bennett. We'll hear some words from the Henry's family and words from the Royal Canadian Legion, which is a bit part of his life, Branch 120. There'll be the storyboard unveiling, and then after that, some time to mingle and take photographs with the family and friends gathered here today. But first, a special thank you to the Lawrence Scots, Royal Canadian Legion Branch 120, and also a member of the Halton Hills Fire Department are here today taking part of the ceremony. Henry Thomas Shepherd was a member of both these organizations, and we're honored to have them here today. So at this time, I would like to invite Mayor Rick Bennett to bring greetings on behalf of Council.
Thank you very much, Warren, and good morning, everybody. And what a member of the Lawrence Scots and a well-respected member of our town. His legacy remains strong among the residents of Halton Hills and the surrounding community. The Halton Hills community overwhelmingly supported the renaming of the park to honor Henry Thomas Shepherd. I remember reading the pages and pages of positive comments that were on our website, and many times to read and have people understand Henry's story. So the town received over 2,000 webpage views when we have a program. It's called Let's Talk Halton Hills. So we said, well, what do you think about renaming? And we had over 2,000 views and over 400 positive comments about renaming the park from residents. So this is how we engage the people as we come today. This demonstrates the important role he played in the history of our town. His accomplishments will continue to inspire generations and for those who have not seen it, look at the online exhibition at the Halton Hills Public Library put on last February for Black History Month. I want to thank again the family who brought the idea forward about renaming this park. This location is so appropriate given the family's years of residence here in this area and recognizes the historical significance of Henry Thomas Shepherd and honors the significant contribution he made to this community. On behalf of the town, thank you. This is what makes our community such a unique and exciting place to be in. Wishing you all many years of enjoyment in this park. Again, it's an honor to be part of today's activities. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have to leave my sunglasses on or else I wouldn't know what I'm sharing with you this morning. Just make sure. So thank you, Warren, and good morning, everyone. And as has been shared, my name is Melissa King, and I am the great-granddaughter of Henry Thomas Shepherd. I'm proud to have been raised here in Georgetown, and although it's been many years since I've lived here, it feels good to be home. As human beings, we are made up of stories that have shaped our lives and identities, and I'm very proud and grateful to have this opportunity to share a piece of the Shepherd family story with you today. It has been passed on to members of our family through many generations in the great oral tradition of storytelling. And recently, my Aunt Kathy Brooks has taken on the role of family detective, and through her perseverance and tenacity, has been able to curate a treasured collection of photographs, artifacts, and information that tells the remarkable story of our family. And because of her efforts to keep our family history alive, we are all gathered here today in Henry Shepherd Park. Members of our family from across this country are joining us here today, sharing in this proud legacy. And there are many layers to our family's narrative, more than we'd be able to unpack here this morning. I will, however, share just a few family history pieces to set the context for the story of my great-grandfather, Henry Thomas Shepherd. Our story begins with the arrival of Henry Thomas Shepherd's father, John Henry Shepherd, by way of a long and dangerous journey along the Underground Railroad. Sometime around 1860, John Henry Shepherd, often described as a babe in arms, and his mother arrived in Halton Region, in Squeezing Township in the village of Stewarttown. Their place of origin in the United States is not known to us yet. However, it is believed that the Shepherd family was separated along the travels of the Underground Railroad. Mrs. Shepherd and John Henry are reputed to be the first black settlers in the area. The Shepherds made their home in a comfortable log cabin on a property that is now the Georgetown Fairgrounds. A pathway through this area was a shortcut between Georgetown and Stewarttown, where Mrs. Shepherd worked in service. Mrs. Shepherd kept house for the Murray family on their farm in Stewarttown, Ontario. Colonel John Murray headed the Stewarttown Battalion and later served in the 20th Halton Rifles, known now as Lawrence Scots. And we're fortunate this morning to have with us Mr. George English, who is a descendant of the Murray family. He's the great-grandson of Colonel John Murray. And George, I'd like to recognize on behalf of the Shepherd family the important link between our families, and we appreciate you joining us here this morning. The relationship between the Murrays and the Shepherds was a long and friendly one. An agreement was made that should anything happen to Mrs. Shepherd, the Murray family would take in and care for her boy, and the Murrays fulfilled their agreement. It has been said that on the morning of his mother's death, young John Shepherd arrived on the doorstep of the Murray home with his modest belongings and was taken in as a member of the family. John worked on the Murray farm and in the home was treated as one of the family. The Murrays eventually hired a young English girl named Sarah Hartley to work in their home. Sarah was one of the 100,000 British home children trained as housekeeper and sent to Canada. Sarah and John married in 1887 and had their first child in 1888. John and Sarah originally lived in a cabin on the Murray farm and later moved into the village of Stewarttown. The Shepherds raised 6 children: Violet Harriet, Jessie Hartley, Flora Mabel, Jonetta Elizabeth, Henry Thomas, and John Alfred. In 1920, the Shepherd family moved to Georgetown. right around here. The Sheppards were very well respected and admired within their community. And over the years, the Shepherd family continued to contribute to their community. They married, worked, and raised families not far from where we're gathered today. Mrs. Shepherd would be proud of her boy, and I can't help but assume she would feel proud to have taken the risk to embark on a journey along the Underground Railroad to provide her child with a life of freedom. The freedom that Mrs. Shepherd sought for her son would be the very thing her grandchild would serve his country to protect. And so I'll advance our story to highlight the extraordinary life of my great-grandfather, Henry Thomas Shepherd. He was a man of incredible integrity, was respected and revered by his peers, and his legacy is carried forward by his family. Henry Thomas Shepherd joined the Halton Rifles at the age of 16. This would be the beginning of his lifelong commitment to and service in the military. At the time of the First World War, young Black Canadians were not always welcomed into the military. It was a white man's war. In 1915, Henry enlisted in the 58th Infantry Battalion, Canadian Expeditionary Forces. In June of 1915, the people of Georgetown bade farewell to the boys who left for Niagara-on-the-Lake, where the battalion was mobilized. There's a note in the Georgetown Herald from the time that states, "On Tuesday evening, June 22nd, Mr. Henry Shepherd, who has enlisted in the 58th Battalion for active service, was given a rousing farewell previous to leaving for Niagara Camp. Mr. Shepherd was presented with a well-filled purse on behalf of the Choir and Improvement Society, and a few very appropriate words were being spoken. Mr. Shepherd replied, thanking all for their kindness, and assured them he would try and do his bit for the Empire. Mr. Shepherd Sr. also spoke and thanked the gathering for their kindness to his son. He was proud to have a boy willing and able to fight for his country." Henry Thomas Shepherd was one of the few Black servicemen who served in non-segregated battalion during World War I. He was wounded twice during his 4 years of service overseas and returned to duty both times. His younger brother, John Alfred Shepherd, also fought in Europe with the 123rd Battalion, and there was another article stating they were both convalescing from wounds at the same time. The signing of the Treaty of Versailles marked the end of service for many Canadian soldiers, and in July 1919, Henry Thomas Shepherd was discharged and sailed for home. After returning from the war, Henry met Susanna Maud Cox, and in August 1923, Henry Shepherd married Susanna in Georgetown at St. George's Anglican Church. Henry worked at the same coated paper mill his father had, along with his brother John, and Henry, as mentioned, was at one time Georgetown's fire chief. Henry and Maud raised 7 girls: Helen, Doris, June, Violet, my grandmother, Mabel, Lillian, and Jacqueline. An only son, John, died in September 1939 at only 4 years of age. In 1928, Henry was one of the founding members of the Georgetown Branch 120 Legion and stayed active in the military with the Halton Rifles. He was promoted and became Regimental Sergeant Major with the Lorne Rifles and the Lorne Scots, making him the first Black man to earn the title in Canada, according to their records. Much of what we know about his service during World War I has been pieced together through exploration of his service records, family photographs, news clippings, and anecdotes passed down. We can speculate he was very well respected within his battalion, given how his military career continued after returning home. His service during the Second World War is fairly well documented, and we have several sources on which to draw out a picture of who Henry Thomas Shepherd grew to be. I'll advance the story several years to a time in our history when war was upon the world again. At the outbreak of World War II, Henry re-enlisted as a private in 1939. However, due to his injuries from World War I, he was not eligible for overseas service. With his extensive military experience, Henry trained at the University Armories in Toronto before transferring to Newmarket No. 23 Training Center, where he was promoted to Company Sergeant Major. During the Second World War, Newmarket was a site of Military Training Camp No. 23 from 1940 to 1944. Troops from all over Ontario arrived in Newmarket each month with a new group of recruits. They'd be eager to complete their military training. The significance of Henry's post in Newmarket can be best illustrated through the voices of those who were there with him. Captain MBE Collier of the Toronto Scottish Company had been friends with Henry Thomas Shepherd for over 20 years. At the opening of the Newmarket camp, Captain Collier is said to have wanted Sergeant Major Shepherd with him and made a bid to get him. Let's wait for a second. According to Collier, Shepherd was one of the finest men to ever don the King's uniform. In a 1940 Globe and Mail article, Shepherd is described as tall, straight as a mast, and with strong, rugged features. There is dignity and pride in his bearing, perhaps accentuated a little by the long, tough struggle from a buck private in the War of 1914 to a senior non-commissioned officer today. There's no color line in the Canadian Army, and the rookies take their orders from Sergeant Major Shepherd as willingly as they would the Colonel himself. They respect him for his enviable war record and for his ability as a training officer, and they like him for his bantering good humor. In the mess, he relaxes and enjoys himself in that give-and-take humor that is common to all Army men. Another voice of the times comes from Stanley G. Grizzle, a well-known human rights advocate who served as an officer of the Toronto Canadian Pacific Railway Division of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. In his book, My Name's Not George, he writes, Sergeant Major Shepherd of Georgetown, Ontario, was the first black officer I had seen in the Canadian Army, and he was the only one I would see for a long time. A final anecdote comes from Rella Braithwaite's book, Some Black Men, Profiles of Over 100 Black Men in Canada. Henry Thomas Shepherd is fondly remembered by radar technician Alvin Duncan. It took a short time to learn that the man in charge was Regimental Sergeant Major Henry Thomas Shepherd, a man of color, a veteran of World War I. Henry Thomas Shepherd stood tall at all times and gave his commands with a demeanor of official authority. All ranks responded to his authority, and in a very short time, what had been a ragtag group of tenderfeet became a well-trained unit that would make any officer proud. Sergeant Major Shepherd was equally at home in the company of the commissioned officers and his men. After drill was over for the day and the men were lounging around on their own time, it was not long before some musical instruments would appear from somewhere. We would then be invited to the officers' mess with our music, and Regimental Sergeant Major Shepherd would generally be there, lending his fine voice to the evening. The officers would come up with songs like, Bless 'em all, You Can Bring Pearl, She's a Darn Nice Girl, but Don't Bring Lulu, and Kiss Me Goodnight, Sergeant Major. Sergeant Major Shepherd certainly made an impact on those around him during his time at Newmarket Camp 23. While at Camp 23, Shepherd's specialist abilities in firefighting and prevention came to light. He had already served as Georgetown's fire chief and headed the firefighting squad at Camp 23. Shepherd was made deputy fire marshal for military camps in Ontario in 1944 and was stationed in Monteith, Ontario. And perhaps his greatest military honor came the morning of December 15th, 1943. It was reported that fire broke out in the center of the battalion orderly room of No. 2 District Company. This warrant officer, as fire chief, was in instant action and showed great courage, resourcefulness, and presence of mind in spite of sub-zero weather. In a wind of gale proportions, with his clothing soaked with water, he ably directed the firefighters, and in spite of heavy smoke, showed great courage in breaking into and entering the burning building, directing the water on the center of the fire, which was quickly under control, saving adjoining buildings, valuable records in the building itself. He set a fine example and showed cool, courageous leadership. Shepherd was bestowed as a member of Most Excellent Order of the British Empire in June 1944 for his courage. Receiving the MBE was a very proud achievement for Henry Shepherd. After the war, Henry continued to involve himself with veterans in a variety of ways, attending welcome home banquets for Black veterans. He was a founding member of the Georgetown Legion, and he maintained his connection with the Lorne Scots. Henry proudly marched as parade marshal for many years, which is a fond memory for his grandchildren. They were always thrilled to see him leading the parade on Remembrance Day and other special occasions. He was a proud Black man who was very respected by all who knew him. Henry and Maude lived out their years in Georgetown, just a block away in the family home on Chapel Street. Courage, perseverance, and tenacity runs in the family. From Mrs. Shepherd's brave journey to freedom with her young son John, to Henry Thomas Shepherd's distinguished military career, there's an undeniable strength that runs through the Shepherd line. There are many things I wish I could know about the lives of my ancestors. They lived in a time when the color of your skin was the sole measure of your worth. The Shepherds faced obstacles and barriers I could never begin to name, and yet they thrived. The measure of their worth is the legacy of strength they carved out for future generations. As much as this is a story of history, it's very much a story of today. Which brings us to the reason we are gathered here today. The naming of Henry Shepherd MBE Park. This honor means his name and legacy will carry on. Henry Thomas Shepherd contributed much to this community through service in the military, through time as fire chief, and as a community member. And as children and families visit the park, they'll learn about this great man and enjoy the same spaces where he grew and raised his own family. Several of the Shepherd family homes overlook or are in the neighborhood of this park, and it makes perfect sense for this space to be named in honor of my great-grandfather. In closing, despite many obstacles faced as a Black man living in tumultuous times, Shepherd challenged the odds and lived his life with passion, dignity, and respect. He was proud to serve his country and this community, and it has been a pleasure and an honor to share his story with you this morning. Thank you.
Was one of the original members of the Royal Canadian Legion. Actually, Henry was one of the original members of the British Commonwealth Ex-Service League, which was the name that the Legion had prior to the Second World War. The British Commonwealth Ex-Service League. And we appreciate the fact that Henry was one of our original members. He was well respected in this town, as I hope the members of the Royal Canadian Legion are well respected. The veterans of our great organization have served their time. They've been to war. Me too. I know how you feel. Somebody throwing stones at me, that's nothing unusual. But the Royal Canadian Legion in Georgetown is not, as a lot of people think, just a drinking hole. It really isn't. The mandate of the Royal Canadian Legion has never changed. That was to serve our veterans. We still serve our veterans today in numerous ways. PTSD is one of the biggest, suicide takers of our soldiers today. I have a good friend in another organization who has PTSD, and I can assure you, it is not fun. We, as members of the Royal Canadian Legion, make sure that our veterans, whether they be here at home or in some of our nursing homes, are looked after. And that's done by your commitment to our Poppy campaign and to your pledges to the Legion. This year's Poppy campaign will start on the 26th of October. We will be distributing our boxes. We don't know as yet whether we can have parades. We don't know as yet whether we can put boxes in the mall or in the superstore, but we are trying. But that campaign will go on. In the last few years, we have made donations to numerous organizations. The hospital, over the last few years, has received over $20,000. Our Air Cadets and Army Cadets also receive an annual donation. Cancer Society and any of the other charities in town are all helped by the Royal Canadian Legion. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of our President, Comrade Jack Mackay, our executive members and members of the Legion, I thank you for inviting us here today. And I would like to end by saying or repeating what we call the act of remembrance. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
Ready? And